turn back to 499. What a friend we have in Jesus. Thank you. We're going to sing the other one. We're going to use canned music for this one. Is the mic, or is this on? Well, it sounds like it's on.
It's on.
It's on. I'm just not apparently. So, sorry, dear. Okay, so we're ready for Go Light Your World, dear. We're going to try this one with canned music. Well, yeah, you guys can stand, Shar. Good idea. Go ahead and stand with us. The slides should be on the screen. I don't see them yet.
There is a candle in every soul, some brightly burning, some dark and cold. There is a spirit who brings a fire, ignites a candle, and makes his own. Carry a candle Take your candle and go light your world. As we were singing that used to be kind of a song to go far away, to go light your world. But it seems like the darkness is drawing closer, at least where I live. I'm from Chewelah on the other side of the big hill. And it seems like the darkness is coming to us. And we're told that the lights shine brighter when the darkness is darker. And isn't that what we're supposed to do? Let's have another prayer. Father, thank you this evening that we can be here. I sense that the people here want to be an instrument in your hands, that you can use us in whatever way you know is best. And so as we talk, as we share this evening, we seek the presence of your Spirit, and we seek him to speak to our hearts. For only you and us know what you are saying to each one of us. We seek your blessing, Father, in Jesus' name. Amen. I feel like I should say a little bit about myself. I've known Pastor Gary the longest. We used to go out and get high together. That is, high on mountains. We climbed some mountains together, like Mount Baker, and we were trying to remember. There must have been another one or two. We had a friend named Henry that liked to go climbing, and I think he's the one that got us kind of tied together. But isn't that how friends work? We're also here together this evening because of another friend. Maranatha called me one time and wanted me to lead a project in Africa on the island of Sao Tome, which is was Portuguese controlled. And in fact, to get there, we had to go through Lisbon, Portugal. And it was there that I met Luana and Nolan and at the Lisbon airport, and we spent 10 days together, something like that. And so I got to know Luana and Nolan, and then she invited us to come here, and she's invited us to the Northeastern camp meeting. And so we kind of stayed in touch over the years. That was in 2018. And so I guess the reason I'm here this evening is because of a friendship that was developed on a Maranatha trip. And it's over the years I've had friends, many friends now. Just a word about me, I've been a logger all my life. Well, pretty much all my life, once I got done with school. And I was raised in a Baptist church. And it wasn't until I was 20, going to college, that I ran into you might say, an Adventist buzzsaw, a young lady who knew her Bible. And I thought I knew my Bible, but when you start really comparing notes, for me, if you want to go by what the Word says, you end up being an Adventist. There's no other way. And so, yeah. As a young person in the Baptist church, we used to have missionaries that would come by every once in a while. to speak to the congregation. I think part of it was fundraising, but I was too small to really realize that. But I was always fascinated with mission stories. And within the Adventist Church, Mission Spotlight, we had one this morning. That's always been fascinating to me. But I never dreamed that I could be a missionary. It never crossed my mind. I've heard of people who have wanted to be a missionary ever since they were young, but that wasn't my case. My dad's oldest sister was a nurse who became a missionary, first went to China before the communists took over. So that's back a little ways. When they took over, she had only been there a year or so. She came back to the U.S. and ended up going to Africa, to what is now Malawi, and spent quite a number of missionary years there. And always interesting to hear her stories. And then the next younger sister married a doctor, Dr. Carmi, and they were missionaries in Iraq. My cousin, who is my age, was born in Baghdad, and 4 days later, I was born in California. So we're close but far away. And and they ended up spending some time in Pakistan also. And then there's others, there's cousins, there's others who, not Adventist, well, the Carmies were Adventists, but most of my family is not Adventists, come from Mennonite roots. And so I like to say it's in my blood, for whatever reason. So in the early 90s, I wanted to start a mission group in Chewelah. And I said, well, let's do something together. And they said, well, you organize it and we'll come. So Maranatha was doing something in Arizona with the Indians there, and nobody was interested. The next year, in 1992, there was Maranatha's big push in the Dominican Republic. And we ended up with, I think, around 35 people from our church that went to do that. And that was the beginning for me and for the Chewelah Church. And so God has blessed me with at least one, sometimes two mission trips ever since then, per year. So it's been a blessing to me. I want to read a little bit this evening from Isaiah chapter 58. I think you're probably all familiar with this. It talks about fasting. This is the fast that I have for you, to loose the bonds of wickedness, to undo heavy burdens, to let the oppressed go free, and that you break every yoke. We have so many yokes going around currently. We've had the methamphetamine yoke. There's the alcohol yoke. There's the tobacco yoke. There's lots of yokes. And now the fentanyl thing that's going on that captures people and won't let go. Is it not to share your bread with the hungry, and that you bring to your home the poor who are cast out? When you seek the naked, that you cover him, and not hide yourself from your own flesh? Then your light shall break forth as the morning. Your healing shall spring forth speedily, and your righteousness shall go before you, and the glory of the Lord shall be your rear guard. Then you shall call, and the Lord will answer. You shall cry, and he will say, here I am. One of the things I enjoy about mission trips is we often think we're pretty much in control of our lives here. Pretty much. You know, we think we can handle most anything. But on a mission trip, you have to make plans, you have to have a goal that you're going to do, and most of the time we end up with lots of prayer and a change of plans, and not totally, but at least somewhat. One time we were going to the Dominican Republic, and the whole group in the bus pulled up in front of the hotel we were to stay at. And the hotel said, what reservation? We're pretty much booked up. And as it turned out, the Maranatha person in country there had kind of dropped the ball on us and had not followed up and made sure they knew we were coming. So what do you do then? There was another hotel in town which was better. Guess where we ended up? The price was a little bit more, but they had lots of room for all of us. And so on these Maranatha things, we have to be flexible. The one Luana and I were on, they were shipping construction components from India to the island, and anything going to Sao Tome has to go through Lisbon. And so these construction parts from India, parts for the building, had left India 3 months before, but they hadn't yet arrived. They were still on the boat. So last minute, we had a change of plans. Instead of building some classrooms for a school like we had intended, we ended up laying block and building a restroom facility, which was not what we had planned, but we like to say that God had that planned. So, yeah, it's an interesting life, at least for me, the change of plans and to follow God's plan and to hear his voice. One other little aspect I want to bring to you this evening is from Luke chapter 14. This afternoon we had a potluck over here, and it was good. It's good food, it's good fellowship, it's a good time together. But in Luke 14, starting with verse 12, this is Jesus talking. He says, "When you give a dinner or a supper, do not ask your friends, your brothers, your relatives, nor your rich neighbors, lest they also invite you back and you be repaid. But when you give a feast, instead invite the poor, the maimed, the lame, the blind, and you will be blessed, because they cannot repay you, for you shall be repaid at the resurrection of the just." I really don't think there's anything wrong to getting together with friends. We're told in other places that we need to do that. We need to press together, especially as we come to the last days. We need to support each other, encourage each other. But I think what Jesus is saying, we need a bigger picture. These people that we build churches for, build schools for, there's no way they can ever repay us. They will give us normally some, you might say, a trinket, just a way of showing their thankfulness. We built a church quite a while back in the 90s sometime for a pastor in the Dominican Republic. Well, it was for the church, but he was the pastor there. For whatever reason, we really connected with him, and for the next 4 or 5 years, I would invite him to come with our group because he spoke English and Spanish, and he would translate. And really got to know he and his family, but he said, I don't know how many of you know about the Chewelah church. It's a little bigger, and I don't want to brag, but it's a nice church. It's a really nice church. God has really blessed our church family there. And he came and saw that church, and he told me, you know, Phil, these people, I was apologizing to him for this simple little structure, a structure that maybe as big as this, you know, just half of this sanctuary here. They'll put 150 people in there, and they're just as thankful and proud of that as we are of ours. He said, don't feel bad about it. Another time we were in Venezuela, before things really went bad there, way out over towards Colombia, little town of Los Ortizes. And we found out there was a reason why it was Los Ortizes, because that's where the Ortiz family lived. And it was probably the most difficult project that I've worked on. Difficult that was in March. My dad had died in November, just before that. And I was still, I guess, in mourning. I still had not really come to grips with that because it was a sudden death. There was no warning. It was just, boom, he didn't wake up one morning. And it was also difficult because there was no place to stay anywhere nearby, no hotel or anything. So the Ortiz family emptied 2 of their houses and moved in with mom and dad, a daughter and a son, and their families, all in this one house together so that we could have the other 2. And so we had women in one and men in the other. With a few exceptions, my wife and I stayed with the ladies because they wanted some male presence. And we had a bunch of young ladies in that house, sleeping on mats on the floor. And Amelia, there were quite a few of them about your age, including our daughter. And at night, the cockroaches would come out and even be crawling on the ceiling, and one would fall down in the middle of them. And then things got lively. Lots of screaming, and yeah. It was interesting. It was hot, humid. Our shower was along a block wall with just a tarp kind of strung around with some concrete blocks to stand on, and used a bucket of water with a scoop, and it was pretty rough. But when we got all done, the grandmother of the family, kind of like Luana's mother, the matriarch of the family, came to me and gave me a silver dollar, a Venezuelan silver dollar from the 1890s. And I said, no, I can't take that. And she insisted that I take it. That's how grateful they were that we would come and build something for them. No way they could pay it back. No way they ever will. But what strikes me as part of this, in verse 14, it says, you will be blessed because they cannot repay you, for you will be repaid at the resurrection of the just. We don't know the effects of what these churches we're building are going to have. How many souls will be in the kingdom because of that? To me, it's heartwarming. And I now have friends all over, and now with our electronic communication, I communicate with different countries where we've developed friends. But I'm looking forward to that time when we can all meet Jesus in the air. And one of you had said something about Costa Rica. We built a church in Costa Rica that it seemed like the church was disconnected. We built the church and we really didn't see the local people. Usually on Friday they come in force and they're cleaning, they're sweeping the floor, and they bring flowers for Sabbath, and they'll hang a big tapestry on the front to cover up the block, but there was just very little response. And I thought, wow, I wonder what's going to happen. And some years later, I had the opportunity to go back to that church. We were working in Panama, but just across the border from Costa Rica, and after I did a site visit, I was able to go back. They had put a ceiling in that church. They had tiled the floor. They had built a porch out in front, and that was all tiled. And the pastor told me they had planted, I think it was 3 other churches that had grown out of that church. In a place where I thought, no, this isn't going to go anywhere. God had other plans. And so this is kind of what keeps me going, keeps me excited about keeping on. And I'm now in my 70s, and as my wife said, you're not going to quit till you drop. And that's kind of how I feel. I want to stay involved, keep going, and yeah. And I'm not at all trying to say that the foreign mission field is the only place. We can do mission work right here, right in our own communities, because it seems like the darkness is closing in, and I don't know how much longer we're going to be able to travel to other countries. We get another big pandemic coming, and it could all come to a stop. But let's do what we can while we can. That's my thoughts. So this evening I want to show a few pictures. In October I had the privilege of going down to Peru. This will be the 5th project that I worked on in Peru. And I took a few pictures. We'll see if this will work again. It worked earlier. Well, this part's working. Visayani. Most of you here are country folk. This church, as you can see, sits in the middle of farmland. There are houses around on the ridge that goes around, but for whatever reason, they were able, a lady donated this piece of ground. It's not very big, but it's kind of in the middle of a field with no houses nearby. So that's going to be interesting.
Is this the one? Is this the project?
This is where we're headed, yes. They were going to close it in with brick, which you see here. Let me see if I can get this. So we're going to jump back a little bit. Getting off the plane, we flew into Lima, and then from Lima flew up to Juliaca, which is up near Lake Titicaca. Gary, did you know Jack Alvin from Enumclaw? He was a dentist at Enumclaw, became like a father to me. He was born near Lake Titicaca. His parents were missionaries there. Being at that altitude, his heart was enlarged. He was a dentist. Dentists work with their fingers. Don't get a lot of exercise, but he also was a mountain climber. And we climbed quite a few mountains together. His legs were quite a bit shorter than mine, but he could keep up, even though he was old enough to be my dad. Yeah, we flew up to Juliaca. This was just after we got out of the airport. Yeah, you can see that pretty well. That's Cynthia. Cynthia is from Bolivia. We met her several years ago in Bolivia. Ginger and I had the opportunity to work on 2 projects back to back with maybe a week in between. One was her class from Auburn, class of '68. There weren't many of them, but we had a nice small group and built a church, and then we had about a week, and then our group from Chewelah came and we built another church. So that was quite a blessing. But they use a tea to help them with the altitude. I guess now there's 2 teas, and the one has some caffeine in it, or caffeine-like stuff, but the other one does not. And did it help? I don't know, because I drank it, and whether it helped or not, you can't go back and do it again. Well, I guess I could now, but I like to think it helped. But she had a hot tea right there, and she said, we'll have this on the bus when we pick you up at the airport, and you can give some to everybody. I did end up with a headache for about half a day, a fair-sized headache. But it was just half a day. I did notice that my feet were heavy. Walking on the level was not bad, but going up the stairs, you start looking for air. Tell the person ahead of you not to use it all. Just a couple street pictures here. See the lady on the right there, that's typical costume for them. Usually quite colorful. See the one in the yellow on the left? They're a big, heavy skirt. Yeah. Of course, there's a lot of modern stuff, and they have a lot of those little 3-wheeled, they call them tuk-tuks in India. And I guess they call them that there also, but they have another name, moto taxi, I think it is, that they call them. This is Cynthia at the hotel where we ended up wanting to stay. It was not real busy. It's not in a real tourist area, a little bit more of a commercial area, but it was very clean, and I really liked that. The kitchen, dining area. See how the lights shine off of the floor? That to me means it's well kept. I appreciate that. We have a university there in Juliaca, an Adventist university, fair-sized. Went by the bookstore. They have stuff for pathfinders and adventurers and steps to Christ. Then we headed out towards Visayani. This is just kind of the typical, I guess that's called Altiplano. Yeah, it's very, at 12,000 feet, you wouldn't think it being flat, but it is. I was there kind of at what's supposed to be the tail end of the dry season, so everything was brown, except where they run some water. But it was supposed to start raining actually before I got there. They said it used to start raining in the end of September. I was there in later October and it hadn't started yet. And they say, we're having some strange things happening here also as far as our weather, and yeah, they're having it there too. The first thing, as I was getting close to the church, this is a school. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the Stalls, Fernando Stall and Anna. They started schools there. For those of us going, I would recommend you do a little reading into that. This was a school that was started by some of the students from the school that the Stalls started. And it's now a government school, but it was an Adventist school. I guess the Adventist presence got smaller and smaller, and so it ended up being a government school. And this is where we can do a vacation Bible school type of thing. We can do a medical clinic. The kind of unlike our public school system, they want us to come. They want us to come and do a VBS, and they'll help us in any way we can. So, yeah, that's part of the plan. A few pictures of the school. Some of the students, I think it's just through 8th grade. This is the communal building. Imagine most of you have heard about Lake Titicaca, the highest navigable lake in the world at, I don't know, somewhere around 12,000 feet. We went out there. This is a floating church. They have these floating islands that I wondered how do they keep them in place? Well, they have them anchored with cable, but it's just this straw from the grass that grows there. And that's a floating church that Maranatha built. This is inside of it. They have it anchored to one of the islands. This, you can see the stuff. They all want to sell you something, and most of it is handmade. And this, these ladies were never miss an opportunity to sell. And this was out near the floating church. This was a statue of Fernando Stahl. Some of the old buildings that they used then are still there. Some of the musical instruments. Yeah, they have some long trumpets there, not just the short one like we saw this morning. But the Adventists, because of the work of the Stalls in that area, are well known. It's, they also have an infatuation with bowls. Just a few countryside pictures. This is a picture of an Inca ruin. Some of these pictures were taken at close to 14,000 feet, and then the mountains go up from there. So, and we that are going, most of us, if we go to Cusco and take a bus through these mountains over to Huánuco where we're going, and we'll see some of this. Lots of terraces. They enjoy music, they enjoy color. This was a kind of a tourist shop, you might say, but it's run by the local Adventist church. This is Maria. Maria is from Cusco, that area. She's the one that's making all of the arrangements for us there. Speaks Quechua. We have one lady here this evening that knows some Quechua. I have a few things in a bag back here. Maybe I can show you later. I didn't bring much. Our car was loaded because we're headed for our daughter's place after we leave here, and we haven't had Christmas there yet. And so it's full of goodies for the kids. Need a backpack? There's just lots of opportunity to empty the coins out of your pockets. you're a musician, there's lots of different, you might say native musical instruments. I wanted to throw in just a few pictures of construction. This is what we'll be doing, is not the brick that you saw earlier, but laying concrete block. The brick are much lighter, but they're smaller, and it takes more of them to get the job done. And besides that, we're more experienced with the block. We laid brick in Chile. And to lay brick, you have to be very precise. And there's some who have that skill, and some of us not so much. But with block, with the brick is the finished thing. And so you don't want to mess it up. You got to keep it really good. But with block, you can be a little less precise. And that stuff they call stucco, we call grace. Because it covers up many mistakes. Yeah. So those of you who haven't been, you'll be learning about this. No, this is from the Dominican Republic. There's not any palm trees up there. Just this picture was taken actually from where we'll be working, at least right close there. They have, any farmers, they have lots of brown Swiss cows, I noticed. I didn't see hardly any Holsteins or Guernseys or Jerseys, but just lots of brown Swiss. There's the building site. And these are some of the church members I got to meet with. They're a hardworking group. They're wearing their more traditional attire there. This is what we'll see when we're there. And this, the bowl in the middle has cheese. And then there's different potatoes around there, and it's all finger food. You just pick some up. I think they had a few paper towels, but also shows you the brick. But yeah, you know, we ask a blessing when we eat, and I have found on these mission trips that it takes on more of a meaning when you're asking a blessing. One time I was with Manuel, we were in Chile, and he took me out to see some friends of his out of town, and they were poor. They had to give me something, you know, it's a cultural thing. You feed your friends, you feed visitors. And so they brought me an apple to eat, which was a really beautiful apple. And they had washed it. But I had seen their well not far from the house, and the water level was about that far from the top of the ground, just an open hole in the ground. I looked at Manuel, and I said, "What do I do?" And he said, "Eat it." So, you know, asking a blessing takes on more meaning when you're in those kind of situations. I had no problem. I've had other problems, but that did not cause a problem. So, this is at the building site. You can see I'm on the left there. That's the pastor. That pastor has since been moved to another. They move them often, 2 years kind of maximum in one place, and they move them. And yeah, this is part of the church family. Not many young people there. I think the young people were all working, pretty much the retired ones. That's Cynthia on the right with the sunglasses. Yeah, she's on the right in your picture. the Bolivian young lady. She's the one that'll be working with us. And I found her kind of remarkable. She has a master's in business and is very good with numbers and helping me figure out numbers, cost figures, but she has come to visit us in Chewelah twice now. She was here, when was that? September? I think some October. Oh, that's right. She was here in early October, and then I arranged my flight so that she and I would fly back down together, and she spent quite a bit of time with me there, searching things out and arranging things, and been a real blessing. So I think that is my last picture. Must be my last picture. So anyway, this is just a peek into what we're going to be doing and where we're going to be. It is high altitude. I'm not going to deny that. At Chewelah, we have a husband and wife who are both doctors. And she went to a medical conference in Denver, spent the whole weekend in the hotel room because she was having altitude sickness in Denver, and we're going to be considerably higher than Denver. And so we don't know. We really don't know who is going to be affected or how much or, how. But there is someone who does know, and he is open to our prayers. Luana is going to tell us a little bit more about this subject. Had to call in the expert.
No, he was going to wait until afterwards on those for people who are interested. Thank you, Phil. Well, that got me even more excited to go. And okay, it is working, but it's not working on the back screen yet, Josh, so I'm not sure. Oh, thank you, Amelia. And no, I'm not an expert on this subject. Phil just asked me to do some research on it because there is the possibility of having altitude sickness. So I have to admit that when I first started looking at this, my perception was, oh, this is nothing. This really isn't something to be worried about. And the more I looked into it, the more I realized it's very something that we need to be aware of and know that it exists and know how to handle things. So altitude sickness, or soroche, did I say it right? Soroche? Soroche, which is translated mountain sickness. And you're going to find out here in a second why it's called mountain sickness, too. So what is it? So it's an illness that occurs when you rapidly ascend to elevations higher than 8,000 feet above sea level. And just to give you a little bit of idea of how that correlates with where this trip will be going, Cusco, one of the elevations that were listed was 11,000 feet, a little more than 11,000 feet. Machu Picchu is almost 8,000 feet, and Juliaca, where we're going to be, is the closest area where we'll be doing the work, is at 12,500 feet. So we're definitely above that 8,000 range there, so it's something to be aware of. You have interject? You might as well just stay up here.
I might add that we're going to Cusco and to Machu Picchu first. Usually we do a side trip at the end of the project, but we're going first there to see if we can adjust to the altitude a little bit for several days before we go on up. So that's part of the reason for
Good.
the way we're doing it.
Yes, that's a very good thought. And the nice thing is we'll be flying into Cusco, but then the next day, I believe, going to Machu Picchu.
Probably that day.
That day. So we'll be going
Not
into
to Machu Picchu, but
go lower.
They have what they call the Sacred Valley, which leads you to Machu Picchu, but it's much lower. It's kind of a canyon.
Yeah. So
And
I don't have the elevation of the Sacred Valley, but it definitely is lower. So flying in at a higher, but then descending. And that is, as you're going to learn, one of the ways to treat altitude sickness is just decrease your altitude. But anyway, so it gives you an idea of exactly how high we will be. It's caused by not being acclimated to the low oxygen and low pressure levels in that area or at that elevation. Usually, if you do have symptoms and you do not feel well because of it, it usually resolves within 1 to 3 days. It's estimated anywhere between 20 to 50% occurrence above 8,000 feet, but like Phil was sharing, some people are very sensitive and can have it at lower elevations, as much as, 5,600 is it at Denver? Mile high, isn't it like 5,280. So it's personal dependent also. Each person's a little bit different. But it's definitely a potential that you could have this issue by flying into this area. The only predictor, when I was doing this research, which I thought was very interesting, the only predictor on whether or not you are going to be highly susceptible to this is you've had it in the past. So if you've had a problem with altitude sickness in the past, then it's a much higher risk that you will have an issue in the future. And Pastor, so when you've hiked, have you noticed? Have you had issues with altitude?
Not really much personally, but I have hiked with those who have.
Yeah, and did they just stop their ascension or did they just kind of go through it?
They usually went till they puke their guts out.
For those of you on Zoom, he said he usually go till they puke their guts out, but we won't be doing that. Okay, so that just gives you an overview of what altitude sickness is. So there are different levels of altitude sickness. The main one is called acute mountain sickness. So that's where that Chewelah comes in. It's the mildest form and it's the most common. Symptoms onset is usually 2 to 12 hours from arriving at that elevation or as you're going up. For us, there's no way to really acclimate because we're flying into it. So it's going to just hit us as we get there. And then there can be 2 other rarer but definitely more concerning levels of altitude sickness. One is the cerebral edema and the other one is pulmonary edema. These are very rare at the elevations we're going to be at, but it's not to say that it couldn't happen. Mainly when these more extreme cases happen, these can be life-threatening if you don't stop and start treating it. So it's something to just be aware of, but again, the elevation that we'll be at, it shouldn't be anything too concerning. And we'll have others there to help us with that.
Can you explain that, what that means?
What means?
You're talking medical language.
I'm sorry. So cerebral edema would be swelling in the brain, and you got the pressure, and that's actually from all the research that I did, most of the symptoms are coming because having that lower oxygen level and the lower air pressure, causes a change in the brain and causes some increased pressure in the brain, and that's where all the symptoms are coming from. Where the pulmonary edema is the respiratory system, the lungs, and it's like a severe pneumonia that you end up with, where you're coughing up bloody sputum, you just get congested, very congested in your lungs. So is that what you wanted me to explain? Thank you. Sorry. So symptoms, we're going to mainly focus on the acute mountain syndrome, or acute mountain sickness, and the symptoms of it. So the main one is headache, and Phil has shared with me, I asked him, I said, so how did you feel when you flew into Cusco that first time? And you shared that you had a headache for about a half a day, and then it just kind of went away. So headache is the earliest and the most common symptom. And then you can also feel fatigue, loss of appetite, nausea or vomiting, general malaise, which is just feeling kind of yucky, dizziness, lightheadedness, difficulty sleeping. So those are just some of the symptoms that you can have. So just a disclaimer as we go forward into treatments of this, that I am just a nurse, I am not a doctor. Consult with your doctor on changing any of your diet, medications, anything like that. So natural remedies for this. There were a lot out there. Maddie's chirping in on it. Acclimation to the altitude is the main one. Just giving yourself time to get accustomed to the lower oxygen. Hydration, keeping yourself hydrated prior to and throughout the stay is a main one. They encourage to drink between 2 to 6 liters. You know, everybody's a little bit different how much water they can take in and still have it be healthy for them. But they said the way to gauge it is to keep your urine just a light yellow so you know how hydrated you are. Supplemental oxygen is also very helpful, especially if you have symptoms. That really helps. Phil has already shared that he's coordinated with Cynthia, that there will be oxygen available for our group, for anybody who needs it. And the oxygen really helps those symptoms very quickly from what I read. Rest when you are symptomatic, so you don't want to really push yourself further and further if you're symptomatic. The coca tea, which is, I think is what she was probably serving you in the car, was the coca tea. It is a mild stimulant. It's used from the plant that they derive cocaine from, but you don't have to worry about, you're not going to have the cocaine effects from having the coca tea. Checking out what your iron levels are beforehand, because we all know that the blood carries the oxygen and our body produces the blood by having iron, and so we want to make sure our iron levels are good, and you can increase your leafy greens or even get supplements if you know your iron levels are low. Ginkgo biloba was another one that you can use. This one I thought was interesting, high carb and low fat diet. It takes less oxygen for us to metabolize carbs than fats. So that was another recommendation. And they recommended that you avoid caffeine and alcohol during that time that you're acclimating, because it can really make the effects of altitude sickness worse. So that's some natural ones. A very interesting natural one that I came up on, and I encourage all of you to, anybody who's interested in going on this trip, do your own checking to find out what's going to work best for you. But this osteopathic manipulation, how many of you have heard of DOs, doctors of osteopathy? Okay, so it's a new thing out there. A lot of our MDs, or the doctors that you go to anymore, they don't necessarily have an MD, they have a DO, which they are very similar to an MD, but they're trained in a more holistic way of treating the body. I'm not real familiar with what the manipulation all entails, but when I Googled it and did some looking, it said it's a therapeutic application of manual pressure of force to the bones, joints, tissues, and muscles. So it's like a massage type of thing. And what I wanted to share with you was this graph, because this graph shows a study that they did at a high altitude lab in France that shows the green dots you see down towards the bottom are people who had osteopathic manipulation at the high altitude. The other ones are a control group that didn't have the manipulation. And so they had these people at the high altitude. These were people who had already suffered from high altitude sickness, so it was a very good chance that they were going to have it again. And as you can see, the duration is on the x-axis there on the bottom, and then the y-axis is the severity of their symptoms. You can see how the people who had this osteopathic manipulation or massages and treatments had very low symptoms of altitude sickness. And these are people who had already suffered from altitude sickness in the past. So I thought this one was worth bringing up because we're all into the natural remedies and, a good massage or something like that. So that's something, if you're interested, check with your doctor before you go. Maybe you can get some treatments to make sure whatever they feel is a good alignment is all aligned before you go. And then there's pharmaceutical treatments for acute mountain sickness. Of course, you can take Tylenol and ibuprofen just to treat the symptoms. And then there's prescription medications that you can talk to your doctor about. The main one that kept coming up article after article after article was the acetazolamide or the Diamox, which is a diuretic. That is actually a preventative one. And almost every study brought that, when they were talking about prescription medications, did bring that one in and said it had very, the studies were showing that it was very good at preventing altitude sickness symptoms. So another one that can be thrown out there. And then there's other ones that you can get prescription-wise that help treat the symptoms, like dexamethasone, which is a corticosteroid, and ondansetron, which is a nausea medicine. It's a pretty mild nausea medicine. So the summary of this is altitude sickness is a real thing. If you're having symptoms and you just try to push through it and you're truly at a high altitude, you can get into those other crises we talked about. So it's not something you would want to do in this scenario where we're going. If you have symptoms, you want to treat those symptoms and take care of yourself until those symptoms start to abate. It's important to be aware of its effects and take appropriate action if symptoms develop. Meet with your doctor if you want to discuss any preventative measures. People with heart disease, lung disease, anemia, and sleep apnea should talk to their doctors before traveling to higher altitudes because you could have some complications. And we want to do our part, but then, like Phil said, we've got a great physician. A physician that knows our bodies better than we do and who can take care of us. And so when I was putting that part together, it made me think of Philippians 4, 6, and 7, which is one of my just absolute favorite verses. Be anxious for nothing, but in all things through prayer and supplication, thanksgiving, bring our requests to God. And the peace which surpasses all understanding will guard our hearts and minds through Jesus Christ. So we need to bring the situation to him and say, okay, God, I've done my part. I've drank my water. I've done the things that I can do. Help me through this. And we can trust, because we're going on God's errand, that he is going to watch over us. And whatever happens is his will. So I think I will turn it back over to you, Phil. And I think he's going to have a question and answer time.
I have always felt that going on these trips, we're really in God's hands because we're doing God's work. And the other thing that has been a blessing to me is knowing that my church family is at home praying for me. And so I would encourage you, when part of your church group is gone, to remember to pray for them. It makes a huge difference. I could tell you a short story. You ready for a short story? Went to India. It was on a more of an evangelistic thing rather than a building. And Chester Shirk, you knew Chester, Gary. He was the evangelist. And if you've been to India, we were staying in a hotel, and every meal is hot. Every meal. Even breakfast. spicy hot. Yes, lots of curry. And so we were really tired of that. Ginger had sent some instant oatmeal with me, which, ooh, that was good. Just add hot water. And, but the word kind of got out to the restaurant that we would like something not so hot. And so they made a sandwich for Pastor Chester. A couple pieces of bread with lettuce and tomato. And I don't remember if there was anything else, but tomatoes are one of the worst things you can eat in a foreign country. It's just they carry more bugs in them for some reason. I don't mean the crawly bugs, but, germs. And he ate that, and it wasn't too long that he was turning green. It was just really affecting him. And also, he was having some back issues. He kind of walked with a little bit of a stoop, and he's bigger than I am. Well, maybe not taller, but bigger. And so he was to preach that night, and there was no way. And nobody else was prepared. I was supposed to be his assistant, but he hadn't shared with me what he was to preach about. And so a whole bunch of the Indian pastors, they all went off into a room, and they prayed over him. And he said that evening, when he walked up to the podium, he felt something warm just come over him. And it came all the way down, and he spoke freely. The sickness was gone. His back was fixed just from prayer. I believe in prayer. Last year, about this time, my right shoulder was giving me problems, and it was bad enough to the point that brushing my teeth made it hurt. We had an elders meeting, and I asked the elders to pray because we're going on a mission trip, and I wanted to be able to work. I'm not a leader that spends his time sitting around. So I get involved. I like to work with my hands, and within a week or so, my arm was much better, and before we left, I was going all the way up. And we have some pictures of, they sometimes put the rebar pretty high, and you got to lift that block up here before you set it down. And my shoulder worked fine. So, I was taking turmeric, which helps with your joints. I believe in doing what we can do, but I also really believe in prayer. Any questions? We still have a room for about a dozen more people. What is?
Can you drink it, the water?
You can drink it out of a bottle, yeah.
Okay, is what bottled water going to be readily available?
We get the big 5-gallon containers, and yeah. I didn't test that part when I was there.
Love it.
You didn't drink any of the regular water.
Right.
What's the food is it going to be provided for us? Are we going to restaurants? Is there a chef?
We're going to be doing our own kitchen.
Okay.
Yeah, I showed you that one picture. I do not yet have a head cook lined up. Lots of people said they would help, but to cook for 20 to 30 people takes somebody that's used to doing that.
Sure. Is it going to be vegan?
Vegetarian?
Yeah, vegetarian.
Vegetarian.
Okay.
And vegans, should be able to do all right. You may have to watch some things for yourself and, yeah.
Awesome.
So when you say we will be doing our own cooking, you mean the group? Somebody will be cooking for us, our group. It's not that we individually will be cooking our own meals, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't want somebody to have the wrong
We will
idea.
probably have some people helping with the
Yes.
cooking.
And so the people who will be doing the cooking, I know in Sao Tome, for us in Africa, it was the same thing. We could not drink the water there. It was unsafe. And so that really limited us on the foods we could eat, because you didn't want to eat something that you couldn't peel because you didn't know how it was washed. And so the cooks that will be cooking for us will know our restrictions and take care of that for us and watch over us. Is that
Yeah.
what your concern was? Okay.
Are we going to stay in a hotel? What are the accommodations like?
I showed you just a couple little pictures.
That hotel?
Yeah, that hotel. I think I don't know, has 30 rooms, something like that. So, yeah, I felt it was a nice hotel.
Yeah, it looked like a nice one. Will there be bathrooms out at the work site?
Primitive, but yeah, maybe a hole in the ground, I'm not sure, with, something around it. I'm trying to remember, they had something there. But yeah, primitive, but yes, there will be something.
Do we need to bring our own tools and stuff? Will they be provided, like gloves?
I have a list, maybe it's time to pass some of those out, of what to bring. You do need to bring your own tools. The power tools are furnished. It's difficult to bring power tools, especially battery-powered ones anymore. Yeah.
Will there be any downtime, free time, or is it all scheduled?
I'm trying to think of how to answer that. We have our vacation time to begin with. And the first Sabbath, we're planning to go to the floating church out at Lake Titicaca. And it takes a boat ride to get out there. And then, the second Sabbath right now, we're talking about going to the university after we have church in our new church and all of that, maybe going for a hike there. I could not, as Adventists, we're kind of traditional into the afternoon hike. And I had a hard time finding a decent place to go for a hike. And at that altitude, it wasn't real appealing to go very high, yeah.
So something I can share with our trip, and I assume you'll pattern it similar, is we would work during the day, but then the evenings, there was definitely time. I remember there was a few times we went for walks around the town we were staying in, and so it's not like every minute is scheduled some type of an excursion or things
Right.
like that. There's definitely in the evenings downtime. It seemed like we had a day or something that, no, I think it was
We
just in
went
the
for
evening.
one long walk, I remember.
Yeah. So definitely time, and it wasn't something that the whole group had to go for a walk. It was just a few of us said, hey, we're going to go walk around town and look around and see what it's like. And a few of us wanted to go, and some wanted to stay at the hotel or do other things. So definitely
There
some
there
downtime.
is some free time, yeah.
By primitive bathroom, do you mean no toilet paper?
It's highly recommended that you have some of your own with you. Yeah, at the hotel, it's not going to be a problem. Each room has its own bathroom. And so that part is good. It's not a communal type thing. But yeah, at the job site, it's good to have some with you. And even flying in, if you want to use the restroom in the airport, down there, it's good to have some with you.
Those little packages of Kleenex and that will hand them and stick in a pocket whenever you're going out.
I oftentimes get a roll of toilet paper that's shrunk down pretty small and actually just squeeze it and flatten it. You know, something that's easy to tuck in somewhere. Teresa?
How far is from Julieta?
To Visiani?
Yeah.
It's, I'd say, half an hour to 40 minutes.
There is not that much, maybe in the evenings they can go, because it's a lot of stores there, it's not like you are gonna be in the middle of nowhere. Then in half an hour, if you need something, you can buy there.
Mhm.
Like, you know, whatever you need.
They have some big stores,
Big stores, yeah.
kind of like a Home Depot. They have that kind, and they also have something somewhat like a Walmart. Gary?
Did you mention that you were planning an excursion to Machu Picchu as part of the trip?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And one clarification, I just wanted to clarify my statement about altitude sickness and hiking, climbing. That was with, most people that I climbed with did not have much of an issue. So I don't want to scare anybody off, but those who did sometimes didn't let us know what was happening, pushed themselves, even though they had symptoms that were coming, they would push themselves until they did what I described. I didn't mean, and had they told us something, there are things that you can do on the mountain to help alleviate that. There's a number of things that you do. Hydration is one, taking breaks, slowing down the pace, pressure breathing, all kinds of things. So I don't want to have anybody think that, not go because.
And Luana was saying that if you've had it before, it's a good indication you'll get it again. But on the other side of that, my son Matthew had trouble on Mount Adams, somewhere, I'd say, around 10,000 feet. And he was very lethargic. But he pushed on up to the top, came back down, and when we got to that place, all of a sudden his bounce came back into a step, and he was ready to go. And after that, we've climbed most all the major mountains in Washington here, and he's never had trouble again. But that's going from probably 13 to, more 20, and so I don't know. It's hard to predict. You can't predict it, I guess.
Yeah, we found, we went to India a couple times, we found that comfort food is often a real help. I don't know what your diet, you mentioned potatoes and whatever there, but we had people come to our room, we had peanut butter and jelly, and we had people come to our room because they needed something familiar. Sometimes, nuts or something like that, or seeds, something helps a lot. I know it doesn't take a lot, but there are times when the local food is lacking or something.
Well, it was too hot all the time.
Yeah, that was my experience in India was, but yeah, this,
We do have some people on, it's okay, it's just the people on YouTube won't be able to hear the comments.
And she's got some more questions.
Yes.
Just two more. What's the weather going to be like when we're there? In the spring?
I have told people before that, do I look like a prophet?
In general, is it like snowy there that time of year? Is it summer?
Yeah, well, what I'm seeing, I actually put it on my phone. You can put Uliaka on your phone in the weather, and it's been running in the 60s most of the time. And the lows at night, upper 30s to lower 40s. And so, no, it's not going to be extremely hot, but it shouldn't be cold. But the other thing with altitude that Luana didn't mention, she was talking about getting sick, but you burn easier. It's quite easy to burn. And so you want to consider that. Sunglasses are good. Shade your head and your neck as much as possible. This is one place where you don't have to wear short sleeves. You can wear long sleeve shirts. And yeah, that is also something to be concerned about. Sunscreen and something in case you do get burnt.
And final one, what's the safety like in the country right now? Is it pretty safe?
All of those countries seem to be having turmoil. A year ago, Maranatha ended up pretty much shutting down because they were protesting, they were blocking airports. One little blessing perhaps where we're going to be is not real far from Bolivia, from La Paz. If we did get stuck, we could actually take a bus to La Paz. But yeah, there's so much unrest. I don't know if you heard, but I think a week ago, I-5 was shut down in Seattle because of a protest. We're just living in an uncertain world, and I personally have felt good about this trip, that it's going to happen and God is going to take care of us. I feel better about it than in 2020 when the COVID stuff was first coming out. I was actually in Peru in February, and we were planning a trip the end of March, and ended up canceling our trip before it all really broke loose. And I felt God's leading in that. You know, yeah. I feel good about it. But I don't know what, only God knows.
As Luana was talking about some of the treatments and things, you know, having your system healthy, the additional greens, the hydration, start doing all of that now, right? So that your body can be stronger. I haven't researched what you were looking at for the osteopathic manipulation, but what occurred to me, so maybe this is something to look into for your own preparation. Weight-bearing exercise puts pressure on the bones and the muscles, and also like weighted blankets. So there might be more than one way to get the effects than just having another person doing the massage. You know, compression type and weight-bearing maybe would be helpful, but very exciting.
I would say also any physical exercise you can do, you know, with your lungs and your heart to build that could be good, should be good. Anything else?
What are the dates again?
March 17, I think, to the end of the month. Yeah, arrive back on April 2nd. By changing, we were going to come back leave on the 31st of March and get back on the 1st. But by shifting that one day, we saved $300 to $400 per ticket. So it was worth Yeah. The last ones we bought were right around 1,200, which is, yeah, round trip. And that includes the flight up to Cusco and the flight back to Lima from Juliaca.
You are going back to Lima before you go to Juliaca, or you go from,
We're going from Lima to Cusco,
okay?
taking a bus over to Juliaca, and then flying from Juliaca back to Lima. So, yeah.
They have a nice buses.
They have some nice buses. I did the trip the other way. I went to Juliaca, then took the bus over to Cusco, and decided the other way is better. Maybe get used to the altitude a little bit first. So, yeah, that's why we've agreed to do it that way. Why don't you give me the black bag?
You can use the train, but it's too slow, right? The train.
It would take much longer, yeah. Going to Machu Picchu, part of that trip is on a train. I brought just a few things from Peru, like this sweater I'm wearing. I got some time ago in Peru. I think it was Peru. I was talking about shade. These hats have a bit of shade to them. I got this one at Lake Titicaca. You can get them at Cusco, say Machu Picchu. You know, they're readily available. Something that you could have used, Maria actually gave this to me. And this is really soft. But, yeah, I used it when I was at our daughter's there in Idaho. A neck wrap, and it's warm. It says Machu Picchu. Yeah. So there's lots of things. Anymore, it seems like if I buy something there, it is something I or someone can wear. And this is the first time I've been to Peru quite a few times, and I haven't seen the local people wearing one of these until this trip. It's cool enough up there that yeah.
Can I ask you a question while you're doing that, Phil?
Sure.
So one thing I remember reading about online, but I think it was only one site that I saw it at, was talking about how inexpensive things were in Peru. Is that true, that you found that things weren't as expensive as here in the U.S. as far as, things like that, and
Yeah,
going
these-
out and buying things?
These are kind of a placemat type thing. I bought a tablecloth. I didn't bring it, but it's our table about 8 feet long, I think, and wide. It's $20. $20 for made out of this type of material. So this kind of stuff is not expensive. I'm not remembering now what I paid for those. The picture I showed you, I had to get something from that lady. There was the 4 of us, and something like this was, I don't remember, about $7, I think. And if you think of all of the needlework that went into that, how long it took.
That's handmade, right?
Hmm?
That's handmade, right?
Yeah. Well, it's sewn, some of it, most of it, but still, it takes hours. Sometimes, well, like that tablecloth, we already have several, but I don't know, it's easy to Jew the people down. And on that tablecloth, I didn't intend on Jewing her down, I just turned to walk away, and she came after me, and she wanted like 25, and then she said 22, and then she said 20, and in a way, that's their living. That's what's going to feed their family. And so I've tried to discourage myself from Jewing them down, which used to be fun, but yeah, this is the way they feed their family, and they put a lot of work into it. There was another family I went to visit, and with Maria. Maria's very friendly, and just saw them outside, and we went over and started talking to them, and they showed us the loom where they thread the needle through, and then they pull it up tight, and how they make those things, and they put a lot of work into it. Any musicians here? Yeah. I can't play it. You want to play it? Those are not expensive. They have small ones like this, and they have big ones. So whatever you can fit in your suitcase. Yeah. I really like this one. Yeah. Just a wall hanging. At least that's how we've used it. Yeah, there's a zipper on the back. Make a.
His cousin was with us and she bought it as a prayer rug for her grandkids. They have bedspreads or something like that.
So anyway, we were traveling light coming over, so we didn't bring very much, but just a little indication of there's so much stuff available. Any more questions?
Deadline.
February 18 or 17. 17 is Sabbath, 18 is a Sunday. But I really need to know by then. And then the longer we wait, the prices are going up on airline tickets already. On the flight that we're all scheduled on, we took all the cheaper ones and started buying a little bit more expensive ones. But yeah, we need to know. Sooner is better than later. Our pastor there in Chewelah really wants to go. His name is Para. He's Cuban, born in the U.S., but from Cuban ancestry.
What's his first name? Matt Parra?
Matt Para.
Vote for Dean. Yeah, he just came back from Australia. That Matt Parra?
Yeah, yeah. Yep, that Matt Para. And this Adventist world still amazes me, because if you go through a few marriages, his wife is related to me. And she's from Alberta, Canada. So, yeah. Anyway, he really wants to go. His whole family really wants to go, but they have 4 kids. Can you imagine 6 people and the cost?
A question was asked if there's any required immunizations.
Tetanus. Tetanus is really the only thing Maranatha requires, and we're not in the hot, humid jungle. We're not down in the Amazon, so you don't have to worry about the yellow fever and malaria and all that. So that part is good. We had the choice of going to, I can't remember the name of it, but it's right down in the Amazon. And either Pucallpa, we could go there, or we could go to Juliaca, and I chose to go with a higher altitude. Just part of it was that reason. When you go down into the jungle, there's quite a few things you need to be vaccinated with. And besides that, I do better with the altitude and cooler weather than the hot and humid. Yeah, well, last year we were in the Dominican and it was hot and humid. Fortunately, we were building within half a mile of the coast, and I think that helped keep it down a little bit.
It is summer in that hemisphere, South America, summertime.
Summertime? What they were saying is they were ready, well, they were working the ground and getting ready to plant when I was there in October. And so it's actually kind of into harvest time. So there should be a lot of fresh fruit and vegetables and, yeah, mangoes, papaya.
That comes from the jungle because the altitude they have mostly potatoes, they have
Lots of potatoes, grain,
grains. But they bring a lot of fruit to Juliaca
yeah.
from the jungle.
Juliaca is not a tourist area, it's more of an industrial area. And so even if you're going to Lake Titicaca to Puno, which is more touristy, the airport is at Juliaca. And then you take a bus over there, which we'll be doing. And we can go on out, if enough people want to, go on out to where the stalls first started. Some of the old buildings are still there. There's not a lot there, but there are some. And so I found it interesting. I like history. Well, our musician is ready to play a tune for us. No? They do very well with that. You know, the local people. I'll have this stuff down front here if you want to come see it.
She said we're good to close with prayer. So let's go ahead and bow our heads for prayer. Thank you, Phil. Dear Father in heaven, thank you so much for the opportunity to go and learn to help in another country, get used to the altitude and all of that. Be with those who are considering this trip and help them in those decisions, and be with us as we continue to plan and prepare to go. Help us to find the right people to come and share your love with those people and build them a new church. Thank you, Lord, for being with us each and every day. In Jesus' name, amen.